We're live. We're live, Ian. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are, wherever you're joining us, whether you're joining us from. I'm delighted to be here. My name is Deborah Croft. I'm one of two co-CEOs who run Thriving Talent, who many of you know is a consulting, training and coaching company based here in Switzerland, headquartered, whose mission is to humanize workplace culture. And that's very much looking at it through this lens of enabling caring and career. It's probably one of the most impactful and inclusive equity, diversity and inclusion strategies. And I'm here with colleague Ian Dinwiddy, who has been on our LinkedIn Lives before and has a font of knowledge in this space of caregiving and this whole topic of gender. So Ian, thank you so much for being with me live today.
Thanks, Deborah. It's a pleasure to be here, and a pleasure to escape from the craziness of builders and kitchen fitters and Christmas, I guess, in many ways, depending on whether you celebrate or not. I haven't really thought about Christmas yet.
No, I know that's the next piece, the whole kind of festive season. So no, I appreciate, and you've got a lot going on multiple levels. We wanted to have this session, didn't we, to again amplify this conversation around caregiving, and we thought it would be useful to start off with, should it be gendered? And by doing that is actually looking at some of the the facts that whether we like it or not, the perception is that caring is gendered, that it's typically associated with females, because of cultural expectations, political, professional contexts, and that historic division of labor. It's how it's been, and the perception that men can and do care, but actually the role of caring is typically females, which we know has a huge cost on many levels, and we're going to dive into that. But if I look at the data, it's always good to start with data. The European Institute for Gender Equality, it says in Europe, so if I put the Europe lens on, 60 to 70% of informal caregivers, so that's all those who do this on top of the day job, are female. And although men are starting to make up, like it's about 30%, that typically is the current kind of breakdown. And so that feeds this perception that, well, caregiving, is gendered and it's very much female only. Now, you and I have been working in this space for a long, long time, and we know that actually we have to change the narrative, because maybe that was the case for our father's generation or our grandfather's generation, but it's not anymore. That's not the case. And I know that because we in Thriving Talent have many dialogues with fathers, through coaching or workshops. And of course you do. You built a whole, mantra around it. So tell us a little bit more about, how do men feel when caregiving so seems to feel it's about, females only? How do we change that?
Yeah, I think that element around it shouldn't be gendered is important. I think when we were talking about, what would you call this session, when we were discussing it, it isn't gendered. Actually, I think that's a little bit of a misnomer, because we know from a societal point of view that caregiving is very much gendered, and in the majority of cases, as you pointed out in terms of the research from Europe, is that informal caregiving is more likely to be undertaken by females than males, and that's really problematic in terms of the assumptions that we make, but also it's based on reality, and it's not that not that men can't undertake caregiving responsibilities. Certainly dads in particular, and certainly in terms of my particular niche around supporting first-year fathers, is that things are moving on quickly. Things are moving on quickly because men are getting more access to the opportunities to be the kind of active and involved dad that they wanted to be. Maybe that kind of role model, that kind of father that they don't remember growing up necessarily. And as countries, so Switzerland being an example that we both know, you know more than I do, but certainly. Oh, am I not coming through? Okay.
That's fine. I think we just lost connection, but it may be just from my side. So do carry on in.
Okay. the joys of going live. As
Yeah.
you know, as we increase the opportunities for men to take parental leave and to take extended periods of time to care for their children, their young children in particular, then we start to change that narrative around the assumptions about who is best suited, to undertake caring responsibilities. And then when we change the assumption about fatherhood and active and involved fatherhood and dads being able to look after children, then we start to change the narrative in terms of how we perceive women in the workplace. And we start to see certainly individuals in heterosexual relationships. We start to say, actually, just because we've got mum and dad doesn't mean mum is automatically going to be the caregiver, dad's automatically going to be the lead breadwinner, and we can't make those assumptions anymore. Certainly something in my own personal experience, in terms of the way that Lisa and I organise our lives, is that I was a stay-at-home dad twice with both of our children. They're now 14 and 11, and Lisa carried on with her law career. She took 6 months of fully paid maternity leave, and I had a couple of weeks of what at the time in the UK was statutory leave, around about £140 a week. So relatively sort of badly paid, and in a lot of relationships, a lot of heterosexual relationships, that creates an environment where women become default carers. And I think that's really problematic for progression for women, and also progression for men to be the type of dad they want to be.
Yeah, absolutely. And it is that stereotyping. It's as if like society is changing, thank goodness, in terms of what, people being authentic and open in terms of the family structures they want and they need. And yet the rest of, we've not caught up at many levels, certainly at an organizational level. And as you say, all the challenges that, we hear from fathers in terms of, the frustration. So, in Switzerland, it was only a few years ago that men had the rights to paternity. And we're still challenging the systems around same-sex couples, both having the right. Because again, this equally applies that actually you're not seen as a partner, in a same-sex relationship. And many organizations until recently didn't have the right policies that demonstrated an understanding. Well, of course, there's going to be families who are same-sex couples too. So how are we making sure we're enabling caring and career for them? But the impression I get is that there is a change. There is a fundamental change, and of course, we've also got the fathers. We're talking about parenthood, and I know that one of the big levers, of course, is policy. We know that, and you're in the UK, and we know that typically the UK is further progressive than other countries in Europe, but also behind in some ways. So I know you did some great work recently, and kind of launched a whole database for the UK market to demonstrate, well, what is, how is that evolved? So what's that journey been like for you in terms of the evolution of the enabling policies for, in this situation for paternity leave?
Yeah, I think it goes back, Debbie, back to that idea around if you don't provide well-paid leave, men in a lot of relationships can't afford to take it, and therefore when we have statutory policy, when we have a couple of weeks in the UK nowadays it's about £186 a week. So a man on average earnings in the UK will lose over £1,000 if they were to take 2 weeks of paternity leave. So it's a real financial disincentive for men to do things. It's interesting you talk about how the UK are ahead on some things. Actually, from a governmental point of view, then we're behind Switzerland. Switzerland are 2 weeks full pay, I believe.
Yes, right. Yeah.
2 weeks full pay for men, and we're on £1,000 below average earnings in terms of taking weeks in the UK. So really, really problematic. But on the other hand, moves towards shared parental leave about 8-9 years ago that were brought in the UK, where parents could share and transfer leave between them, was actually a catalyst for organisations to do things very differently. And so, starting largely with financial services and spreading out across sectors, more and more organisations are seeing the opportunity to provide well-paid leave that men can access, whether that's via shared parental leave or, more importantly, via ring-fenced paternity leave, as a way of improving their recruitment and retention of individuals. but also changing the gender equality narrative within organizations. If you're in a business that's offering 26 weeks full pay leave, regardless of how you become a parent, really does change how we see individual opportunities, how we see that sense of commitment, who's someone who you want to employ or promote. If you can't tell which individual who might have children might take leave, and they might be out of the office, they might be away for 6 months. Traditionally, in a lot of organizations, that has been the default, has been a female candidate, perhaps a female member of staff is more likely to take that leave. Organizations that do things differently reap the benefits of seeing equality in a very different lens, certainly through sort of new parenthood. In terms of my database, so we've got 286 at last count, organizations within the UK who are offering leave, a minimum of 2 weeks fully paid paternity leave is what it requires to get onto the database.
Right.
At the moment, we've got 58 businesses that are offering at least, or organizations, not necessarily businesses, but 58 businesses offering at least 26 weeks. So 6 months of fully paid equal leave, regardless of how you become a parent. 5 of them are going beyond that 26 weeks, but they're all equalizing. And beyond that, we've also got a lot which are equalizing at 24 weeks, at 20 weeks, 18 weeks of fully paid leave. So they're doing these two things. They're enhancing the leave that men can take in their own right. So these are not organizations that are putting in shared parental leave where they can transfer the leave. And that comes with a lot of baggage in terms of access for shared parental. It's however you become a parent, adoption, surrogacy. If you're a parent at these organizations, these 58 that we've identified so far, and I know there's more out there because the number keeps growing, businesses start releasing new policies, and we're seeing Deloitte in the UK going to 26 weeks, which was a big step forward in terms of that sector. And obviously we Thriving Talent work with Deloitte in Switzerland in particular, so it's great to see that business sort of leading the way in the UK as well.
Yes.
And we've also got 179 businesses in that database of 286 who are offering what we consider to be really, really important, which is 6 weeks for dads. So 6 weeks of fully paid paternity leave that men can access in their own right, so not via shared parental leave. And there's 176 of those businesses, and that's a really key part of the Fatherhood Institute's drive towards normalizing this sense of actually 6 weeks is what you need as a parent to support, potentially support a partner, to support a new child, whether, regardless of how you become a parent. So there are a lot of organizations out there. And one of the things that I'm really proud of in terms of the database itself is that you have the opportunity to compare by business size and also by business sector. So as organizations, someone can access the database and they can benchmark. They can benchmark against their peer groups by size and by sector.
And it's so interesting what you say. And I think for people who are listening to this or watching afterwards is, what you're touching on, Ian, is when we talk about how do we enable caring and career in a workplace, a lot of the time we're still convincing the board. We're still influencing. And I know that in different mandates we've had where people come to us because they're like, we know you value enabling caring and career. That's the heart of what you do and why you do. They say, how do we convince the board? And we always come back to data, which is, well, okay, so that we know what motivates the board. First of all, how much money are you going to save when you prevent the visible and the invisible attrition? The cost of that is significant. And as soon as you start quantifying that cost, and then you compare it to the investment in, as you say, paid parental leave or carer leave, it makes pure mathematical sense. And so you have, that's one of your levers. The other lever when you're convincing a board is exactly what your database provides, which is a compare and contrast. Because as soon as you start demonstrating, and we've done this so many times, how you fare compared to your competition. At a time when we know there's labor shortages or skill shortages, but we know your organization really needs to focus on its employee value proposition, because people are choosing where they want to work.
Yeah.
And we know that this kind of data makes people think, actually, if I've got a choice and everything's like for like, the salary's the same, opportunities are the same, and yet this organization, through its policies and through its reputation, through its processes, it would seem that they do create an environment where you don't choose between caring and your career. You can actually have caring in all its facets and career. Yes, of course, there's compromises. So when we're talking about how to enabling it, I think, sources like yours of that database are a great way to think, well, what's our competition doing? And even if it's not your competition, it's also looking at those organizations where your talent that you need maybe work for. So it could be you're not in the tech sector, but actually you need some of those skills. Well, they're going to be looking and comparing. So, when you need to get a board to get behind you, and I know there's a lot of passionate sustainability managers, HR managers, D&I managers, who are waving the flag, and they need to do the convincing. So, for those of you who are still in that situation, and it's frustrating, we get that. You look at that data, that you can take to the board and tap into resources, like this database. And I know, Ian, yours is the UK. We've done something similar in Switzerland, but it's very actually easy to look at it from a global viewpoint too. So I know that we've only got 30 minutes, and of course this is our favourite topic, you and I. Let's kind of lift it up a little bit in terms of, well, we're kind of saying, is it gendered, and we're looking at it through the lens of, well, the kind of the other partner, so whether it's same-sex, females, males, and looking at it through policy. And I think it's also important to broaden the narrative. Because caring, yes, we've already seen the data. 60 to 70%, 7% is caring for children, and caring is multifaceted. It's not only caring for children and not only caring for babies. So we're talking about policy, and as an organisation, this is where the most progressive organisations are starting to look at this wider narrative and thinking, well, actually, if we have a strategy, a D&I strategy, which is where everybody can see themselves. That's quite unique. And how do we do that? And actually, if you make caring and career your strategy, then what you're saying is, well, caring is self-care, caring for, children, as we talked about, but of all ages, the needs, what I have as a parent of teenagers, 16 and 18, is very different when they're 16 and 18 months. So it's, what do you need?
I'm not sure it's easier though, is it?
No, it's not easier. It's just different. Caring in the community, caring for pets, caring for aging parents. A lot of us are in a global workforce where our parents aren't necessarily in the same country. And so this is when, again, we need to expand the conversation. So, okay, so what are the enabling policies, not only parental leave, caregiving leave, global mobility policy, so you can actually be in the country, the processes, how easy is it to actually use these various policies? And of course, the leadership behaviors. And I know, in the work you do with us as well, with the workshops, with coaching fathers, a huge influence is what you can do as an individual and obviously the system. But if I think of as an individual, if you were to give advice around the upskilling, what would that look like as you make this transition into this caring role?
Yeah, I think it's easy to underestimate how important those soft skills are that are developed for any kind of caregiving activity. And there's some interesting research that a colleague of mine sort of picked up, Frances Cushway, who may or may not be listening in. And she discovered some really interesting research from university in North America. And they were talking about these 3 bundles of caregiving skills that people were identifying. And they bundled up into humanity skills, productivity skills, and cognitivity skills.
Okay.
And these were about caregiving, unpaid caregiving skill sets that you'd increase. And those soft skills that actually make you better at being a leader, better at being a manager, better at working with other people. So things around empathy in particular, that was the number one identified element. efficiency, tenacity, and persistence. I mean, anyone who's taking on any kind of caregiving roles with any children, I mean, mine are, my son's 11, and the tenacity and persistence to make sure that homework is done on time and done to the right quality, that's certainly a soft skill. You can't, there are ways of presenting at work, and there are ways of developing skills that actually parenting and the opportunity to be hands-on and care and caregiving, whatever that might look like. I mean, we're training in inverted commas kittens at the moment. So we've got 2 new kittens. When you say taking on too much, actually, there's too much going on. Christmas will be hopefully a little break when we can do that. But there's a degree of challenge there. So prioritizing tasks, things like that. So the sort of things that caring responsibilities, regardless of what it looks like, actually enhances your ability to do your job, especially around the classic one. I think is probably around prioritization and efficiency. I remember as a 20-something-year-old working in publishing, I had quite simple kind of work-life balance sort of requirements and needs. One of them was, a pub at 7 o'clock on a Friday evening, and because the pub and I was working in central London, that meant I worked a bit later on a Friday. People were like, "Oh, don't you have a home to go to?" I was actually, I'm just waiting to go to the pub. But my time expanded to fit, my work expanded to fit the time that was available. So anyone with opportunities, a requirement to be in a certain place at a certain time in order to provide care, whether that's for your new puppy or whether it's for your mother-in-law, potentially, then that does make you much more efficient. It makes you realize what's important, and you're much more likely. I think parents being efficient it can never be underestimated how important that kind of, or carers being efficient, how important that is for facilitating sort of really good sort of working practices, I think.
Yeah, it's what you say is reinforced when we started moving into this space many years ago of empowering, originally as empowering parents. It was quite niche, and one of the big pieces that kept coming up was those who had taken a career break because they had to choose between caring and career. And part of their journey or transition back, and a lot of companies, as we know, spend a huge amount, attracting people back to work, who've typically taken a career pause because of caring. And part of that journey is also that individual confidence of, actually, I've got a huge amount of skills, all those skills you just named. I haven't been singing in a vacuum. The competences I've built and matured in the last however many years are a huge asset to an organization. And part of that is recognizing in yourself, well, maybe you have taken a pause for whatever reason, whether it's your own self-care or, as you say, caring for others, whatever that looks like. And in that journey, it's recognizing all of those competences you now have, or that you've deepened that you didn't know before. And you're right. When people have all these extra hats they're juggling, they sometimes we're seen as a bit too focused, because you're so laser focused on, I need this to finish because actually, I need to be at the nursing home at a certain time, or I need to pick up and do a taxi run for the gymnastic club or whatever. There's not a deadline that moves, and so there's this element of caring that actually you are laser focused, which is why often there's this reference to huge performance. So when we're thinking about how do we enable caring career, we're really saying, first, take the gender out. Okay, caring is more is not gender specific. So really, as an organization, at a system level, look at, well, who are we excluding in our current policies and processes? And as I said, there's huge intersectionality. The only way you really humanize a workplace culture is when you look at the policies, the processes. How easy is it to use, for example, global mobility, to go and work and be with my aging parent in another country? What is the training and coaching? These life events that we're navigating, how am I supporting? A lot of organizations, for example, will offer EAPs, or, as you say, a few of our clients, they run workshops and coaching because they know it's a joyful time and it's lonely. And the fourth pillar is is leadership behaviours. And that really comes to something you and I have talked about in the past, that you can have the best enabling policies in place and processes, and actually kind of the best coaching and workshops in place. And yet, if your leader and the senior leadership team are not role modeling and amplifying actually when they need to use flex work to visit their parent who's got Alzheimer's, or to take care of their partner, who's got cancer, or look after their children, and all of these are very relevant, pieces we navigate, then if that's what success looks like, people will not step in to do it. So the role of the leader in all of this is so integral. And I know that you and I have spoken about that, this whole role modeling.
Yeah.
And again, organizations need to be encouraging of their leaders.
They do.
So,
yeah.
Yeah.
Especially their male leaders, and it can feel, certainly we look at it from a sort of parenting perspective, then putting fatherhood on a pedestal and saying, look, here is a great dad. He's doing things that are great for society, great for his family unit, whatever that might look like. That can feel quite uncomfortable, because actually the bar is set quite low for what society deems to be successful for dads, in a way that it isn't for mums. And actually but we do need to do that. We need to, in particular, we need men to parent out loud. We need them to talk about their caring responsibilities. We need to have their diaries open so that people can see what's going on. We need them to talk about it.
Yeah.
A big part of the events that I do, and I've done 6 events in the last sort of week or so around International Men's Day, is actually involving men in the conversation, men who have varying different types of fatherhood journey, age of children, and that sort of thing, and talking about the pressures that they face in terms of their work, their time with their family, their time with their partner, enabling their partner's career progression, whatever that might look like. It humanizes this conversation, which says, actually, it's okay for men to talk about this. And actually, sometimes we need senior male role models in particular to unlock that perhaps slightly hidden desire that men have to be caregivers, and to have balance at home, and to be equal partners within their relationships, whatever that might look like. But actually, sometimes you need, because of that societal assumption, sometimes you need the brave men, maybe what Dr. Jasmine Kellen would call the cavalier carers, to be up on a pedestal and say, actually, I'm doing this. This is what my life looks like. It's tough, but this is what I do. And then suddenly other men are thinking, actually, oh, well, my life's like that too. Maybe I need to be talking about this more. And maybe, I can get some of that flexible working that my colleague has talked about. And maybe I just need to have that conversation. And we can hopefully start to break that line manager lottery that can happen when fantastic policies meet up against individual, perhaps resistance or historical kind of stereotyping that individuals might have. And for my final bit on this is a cross-generational thing. It's certainly for older men to consider how they can give a gift to younger men in terms of helping them to have the caring responsibilities, or the balance between caring and career, that perhaps they didn't get the opportunity to as a young man. There's certainly lots of men out there for whom they may well regret the lack of opportunity they had, and maybe the relationship with their children isn't as well developed as they hoped it would have been when they started out. Policies are there in a lot of organizations. Sometimes men just need a bit of a push to kind of engage with them and say, actually, it's okay for me to do this, okay for me to take this leave, or to access flexible working arrangements.
Yeah, and it's also kind of normalizing all the challenges and the fears, what it's like, and it is asking for what you need, and it's that motto of share the care at home, at work, and making sure that you don't kind of fast forward in 5-10 years and have these regrets, because when we're navigating moments that matter in our life, typically those moments don't always last forever in terms of the choices we make around those moments. And so, you creating organizations who create a workplace which really enable us all to navigate those moments that matter in our life, we know have huge retention and attrition. And so, as we come to a close, and I want to re-emphasize these key messages, that caregiving shouldn't be gendered. No, it shouldn't. And how do you enable it? Well, start looking at your kind of cultural, your vision, what you want in an organization, and think, well, caring, we're going to lift it up. We're going to look at how do we enable caring in career, where caring is multifaceted. How do we enable self-care, caring for children of all ages, caring for aging parents, caring for pets, caring in the community, so you can choose both, not either or. And looking at that through the intersectionality of policies, processes, leadership behaviours and training. And if your system you're working in isn't providing that, be that lobbyist, be that activist, ask what you need, for sure.
Definitely.
And then equally, as an individual, start, making those choices for yourself in terms of actually, how do I share the care? What does that look like for me? Yeah, and Laura, thanks so much, because I know that you looked at this at Hilti, a few years ago as well, and the flexible working, policies are such a fundamental lever to enable care and career. So thanks for highlighting that in the comments. But Ian, as we knew we would, we've run out of time. So thank you for having a break from your kitchen being built behind you to enjoying some self-care, because you're talking about a subject you love. And congratulations for all the work you're doing on that database, because I think that's something that data is often what people need to make the changes. So thanks for all that work too.
Thanks, Debbie. It's a pleasure being here and having a conversation about enabling caring and career, because I think if we get it right, it's good for families, it's good for individuals, and it's also good for the workplace and society more generally. So it's worth doing, worth getting right.
Absolutely. Let's keep banging the drum. Take care. Have a lovely weekend for those of you listening, and I'll speak to you soon, Ian. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.